Hello. Hi, Gail. I'm just going to give it a minute or two. Some folks are still joining, so we're just going to give it a little bit longer. And while we're waiting for everyone to join, I'm going to log into FutureFeed.
Can you hear me by the chance?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. All right.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Share my screen here. Okay. Okay, so maybe one more minute. I'm gonna just give it one more minute. Let some folks join. There's already four of us on the call. So thanks for everyone joining. My name is Rachel Lighty. I am the Director of Compliance Education here at FutureFeed, and I'm going to be running today's training session. Today's session is called Training for End Users, session number 1. There are 2 training sessions that I would recommend you go through. This being one of them, and then the second one, while we're just waiting here, if you log into FutureFeed and scroll, like any page in FutureFeed, scroll to the bottom, there's 2 links. This first one here, register, that's how you can get to our training page a little bit faster, and you would sign up for training session number 2 after today and whenever you feel ready. I do say that, once we complete today's training, I would recommend that you just spend some time in FutureFeed practicing what we covered today to really solidify that knowledge. And then when you feel ready, sign up for session 2. But you can sign up for these sessions as much as you want. And um, what else? So also at the end of the bottom of the page in FutureFeed, we have this 15 minutes with FutureFeed session here that you could register for. This is a recurring meeting. It happens every Thursday at 1:30. What is this? At 1:30 Eastern time. And it's actually for 30 minutes. We call it 15 minutes with FutureFeed, but it's a 30-minute meeting. And I host it. The only reason, if I'm not there, that means I'm out sick or traveling, but I'm usually the one on the call. And it's a open office hour. It's 30 minutes with me every week if you need it. So for that one, you would just have to register once, and then the series would be on your calendar. And so join the, the weeks that you need help on something in FutureFeed. Let's see here. Okay, we got decent amount. Okay, we could get started now. This session is being recorded. Okay, so after today's session, after I end the call, it should be about an hour and a half after I end the call, you'll get a link to the recording. And does anyone have any questions, concerns, comments before we jump into it? Nothing? All right. Feel free to shout and interrupt me if you do have any questions as we go on, okay? I just want to open this page. I know I'm going to use it in a second. All right, so FutureFeed. Here's what FutureFeed looks like. I'm sure you guys all know that you have access. So I'm just gonna get started. I'm gonna cover the dashboard area of FutureFeed today, then start, and then I'm gonna talk about people, tools, and documents. We're gonna end there. This second session is to go over assess, assess, SSP, POAM, and deliverables. And we refer to this menu up here as our subway line. The owner and developer of the app had designed the interface to they laid it out in a way where you would work left to right. So you would review the dashboard page, and then if you're just getting started using FutureFeed and filling out the data, then the thought was you would start here and then move on to people, tools. You're working left to right, stopping at every subway stop along the way. So we do refer to this throughout our training material and some videos as the subway line, and each one of these pages or sections of future feed, if you will, we call these subway stops. All right. So if you hear me say that, then just wanted to clarify what I meant if I call it a subway stop. All right. So dashboard. When you log into future feed, it brings you to this landing page. This is your compliance dashboard. It's a nice graphical view of your current status. So it provides some information here, just play around with it. Semi-interactive, so you can drill down from control family to assessment objective. Looks like here I'm almost all implemented except D. And I could jump to that area in future feed where that control is listed out and the status gets documented. Um, so just a nice graphical view of compliance status. And also in the dashboard area, we have this assessment prep center. So what this is a newer addition and we're still kind of working on improving it, but the first take of what was requested is fairly good. This was requested by some of our users. By the way, if you ever as you're working in future feed, if you find something that could be improved or added to future feed to make your life easier, we really like that kind of feedback. So don't feel uh, scared, I guess, to submit a request to us. You can contact future feed at support at futurefeed.co. And if you email them with any of your ideas or improvements, then we do review each one of those. Um, so what this is, the so here we go. We got subway stops over here. So these are all pages in future feed. Okay. Let me show you. I'm gonna go to this contract manager page. Okay. So now I'm at the contract manager page. This box up here, this compliance review box, it directly relates to that other page. So here I'm going to make this approved and go ahead and sign it. All right. And now if I go back to the assessment prep center under contract manager, it's been approved by me. Okay. Today's date. So all of the pages in future feed, for example, if I go over all of the pages up here on the main subway area, if I go up to people, you'll see we have a complete compliance review box, tools, compliance review box. So this compliance review section is what you're doing under this assessment prep center is you're just seeing all of those compliance review boxes for all of the pages in one page. And you could reset them all if you'd like, if you need to. I'll just go ahead and do that. So, how you would use this though is there's just a lot of information that gets put into future feed, and future feed's going to make for you a system security plan. It's going to generate for you that system security plan. It's going to help you with managing um, your system POAM by giving you that tool to create the POAM. But all of those deliverables up here, it's only as accurate as the data you put in future feed. Okay. So we don't have any control about the data. We just manage the tool. The accuracy of the data and having to put the data into future feed is your guys' responsibility. And so this assessment prep center here is whenever you move into like an official assessment cycle, let's say a C3PAO assessment, you might want to use this page and assign all of the pages to someone in FutureFeed or to someone at your company so they can review that section of FutureFeed for accuracy and get it approved. For example, that contract manager page, I would assign that page to my someone at my company who's responsible for managing the contracts, because that's where we document the contract information and that would need to be accurate. Okay. So that's how you would use this page. I mean, you don't have to use it if you don't want to, but if you'd like to do an official review of Future Feed and the data in Future Feed in your Future Feed, then you can use the Assessment Prep Center and those compliance review boxes. Critical dates here. This is for you to plan out the C3PO engagement when you're going to get assessed. If you have any findings, what's your date for remediating those findings? Um, so just dates. And what happens is when you check this little circle over here, it's going to take a snapshot of your system security plan. So just give it a minute here. It's creating for me a system security plan. Now I could view my system security plan here, but the thought was along um throughout your project, these milestones here, you would essentially take a screenshot of your system security plan and your score so you could see how your score is improving throughout the project. Here, obviously, bad example, we are not improving, but this is a fake environment. So, all right. If you want to see responsibility assignment for yourself or members of your team, then you're going to be working on the team responsibilities area and the individual responsibilities area. Um, all throughout FutureFeed, when we assign responsibility, we're using that RACI matrix, and we'll go over that in a little bit. So if you get assigned as either responsible, accounted, consulted, or informed for any of the control requirements, any of the IT assets that get put into this tools section here, any of the security documentation that gets put into this area here, um, any tasks that get assigned to you, or any poem items that get assigned to you, all of those things would show up here. See, it looks like I'm responsible. I'm the responsible person for this acceptable use policy, which is in the poem and it has a due date. So, teams, just click on your team member and then you're going to be able to drill down to see what they have assigned to them. All right. Any questions with this dashboard area? Pretty easy to go over. Okay, so then start. In the start area, you're providing a lot of information about your company at a high level and also identifying the data in this environment, the contracts that your company has, and you have the ability to configure a couple future feed settings in this start area. So, by the way, I want to call out these getting started guides. So these getting started guides are, as you can see here, they're on every page. It's like a built-in user manual. Okay, so if you're ever stuck on a page, you don't know how to do something, or you're not sure what information to put in, go ahead and look at those start getting started guides here, and it's gonna provide you some more detail. So one place to reference for some answers is these getting started guides here. It's present on every page. Another area, if you go up to your user icon, top right corner, go to Help Center. You do have to log in here. And you're gonna have to make an account. Okay. If you've never logged in, just make account. It's free. It's a FutureFeed site, but it just doesn't use your same FutureFeed credentials. But here is where we put a lot of our, user how to knowledge based articles. Okay. So you would search here for answers and in this getting started guide. If you still don't have your answers, again, just reach out to support@futurefeed.co and we'll get you an answer. Or join that Thursday session and you can ask me directly. Um, all right. So company information, pretty self-explanatory here. Just information about the company, address, contact information, logo. Down here, risk appetite. So you have you can track your company's approach to handling risk. And for more information about the categories here, reference the informational, what would we call these? Like these little green dot informational things that you could hover over and see more information or go up here to the getting started guide. So, where this information really comes into play, though, is when you're working in your system POAM. Okay, your system POAM, which is a document you need to have per NIST 800-171 in the CA family. Um, the purpose of your system POAM is to track non-compliance at the very least. And some people use their system POAM to also track vulnerabilities or other system flaws. And so, really, when you have, like in this fake environment here, I have 143 POAM items. And to begin working on those, I'm going to prioritize the more important items that introduce greater risk into my environment, okay? And so that's how you use your risk appetite. Once you document what your risk approach is or your risk tolerance level is, then you can factor that information in when prioritizing your remediation or implementation efforts. Company description, again, just very self-explanatory here. More information about the company. You have a place to document cybersecurity budget, IT budget, and cybersecurity insurance if you have it for the company. Obviously, the budget would come into play with acquisitions of technology or, again, POAM remediation projects, cybersecurity insurance. You definitely want to know that when if you have an incident. Locations. So this is important because here's where you're starting to define your assessment scope. Okay. If you're kind of new to 171 CMMC, you have to have a defined assessment scope or compliance boundary. I like to use the word compliance boundary because it makes more sense to me. But anyway, what it is it's you have to identify the assets, and assets are people. People can be an asset, technology, and locations. Okay, those are your assets. Locations, people, technology. So in an assessment scope, you have to identify those assets that need to adhere to NIST 800-171 requirements. Okay, so here's where you're going to start doing it for your locations. And here, just click new location, give it a name, address, contact information. After you enter a new location, then you would open it up and then fill out all this metadata. Definitely get responsibility assigned, who's responsible for security at headquarters, who's overall accountable, consulted and informed, description if you need to, um, connecting the requirements. I'm going to go over connect, compliance, task assignment, and evidence a little bit later when we get into tools and technology. So if you have any questions about this, just hold off. I'm going to cover it more in depth when we get to technology. But this location entry, by the way, I refer to these squares here in all of my training videos as inventory items. So think of these as folders, okay? Folders for an inventory item. So now here's my inventory item, which is headquarters, and it's got a whole folder structure in here where I can upload documents. Maybe I'm renting that facility from someone, so I want to upload my, rental agreement. And I can house other evidence in here. So maybe I want to upload a layout of the facility a facility map that identifies my security equipment, So think of it as a folder, and you could house more documents in here and provide more data about that inventory item. And again, I'm going to go over this here in a little bit when I get to tools and documents. But just know, after you add a location, open it up. And the one thing I'll point out is under the compliance tab is how I'm going to identify if that location has CY at it or FCI at it. So if this location has FCI data, yes or no, let's say no. Um, if it has CY data here, I'm going to click on the CY icon and then identify the type of CY that is being stored at that location. Okay. Maintenance and ownership. This is just high level description of who maintains and owns your hardware software. If you want to get an idea of how I would write that up, just go into the getting started guides under compliance implications, and there's a table here where I give an example on how I would address this section. But really, you're just, defining the hardware, the software in your environment, who maintains it, who owns it. And this information does get put into your SSP. So all throughout FutureFeed, if you're curious to know if something is getting pulled into your system security plan, you can look for that little asterisk. That is a good indicator that this data is going to show up in your system security plan when you generate it. Scope. So here's where you start defining your system. You're going to give your system a name, identify the type of system, describe the system and the purpose of the system. Contracts. Your environment needs to be associated with one or more cage codes. So you would add your cage codes here. And if you have multiple cage codes, then you probably have the highest level owner or it's hierarchical. So whatever your highest cage code is, you'd identify that. And then contracts, this is where you would log the contracts that your company has that is introducing CUI or FCI into your company's environment. So specifically the contracts that have one or more of these clauses present. These are DFARS and FAR clauses. They're federal contract clauses that you find in contracts that are communicating requirements to your company if they sign that contract. Okay, so this is a really good place. If you haven't started doing your scoping exercise yet, or defining your assessment scope, or defining your compliance boundary, then you're going to have to do what is referred to as a scoping exercise. You're going to have to identify where this data is being stored, processed, or transmitted, meaning every place it needs to be secured. And to do that, it always starts with identifying the contracts your company has, because once you figure out the contract that has the CUI or FCI, then you just follow where that data is being shared, generated, or stored in your environment. And those would be your assets and scope. But it's a lot to do. But here's a place for you to document those contracts that are introducing FCI or CUI into your environment. Okay, and then we move on to data inventory. So you have to identify if the environment has FCI in it and or CUI in it. So for FCI, it's pretty simple, right? Over up in tools here, once you log or create a record for all of your technology in the tools area, then they show up here, just listed out, and then you just say yes to the ones that store, process, or transmit FCI data, and no to the ones that don't. These are your FCI assets then. Under CUI here, a little bit more information gets displayed and captured. Okay, because CUI is a beast. So all of these categories that we have listed here, they're coming from the NARA registry, the NARA CUI registry, sorry. And let's practice with export controlled. So let's say that your company does have export controlled, DoD export controlled information. You can click on the link to get learn more about what it is. This is important, how to mark it. Okay, there's two different markings for this one. If you're curious, if someone ever asks you, do you have basic CUI or do you have specified CUI? Well, here's how you figure out one, who's disseminating that information to you, what clauses are present in your contract, but here, basic or specified. If I go back, if we click on controlled technical information, this is a common category that we see in the DIB contracting space. And if you click on that, that's only ever specified CUI. And this is how you would mark your CUI data in your environment if it is CTI CUI. Okay. So all of these hyperlink to the NAR registry, which I would recommend visiting so you can at least know if it's basic or specified and how to mark that data. But let's pretend you do have CUI specified. So you could just click the box, ignore all this other stuff. Obviously, we got to go in here and clear it all out. But for today's example, we're going to click the box. So you could leave it at there. And now, from an outsider's perspective or someone else looking at your FutureFeed environment, to me, just the checkbox says that yes, somewhere in your environment, somewhere in your assessment scope environment, you are storing, processing, or transmitting CUI export controlled data. Now, you could take it a step further if you would like, and instead of saying somewhere in this environment, I'm storing, processing, transmitting data, well, these specific assets are storing, processing, and transmitting this type of data. And that's when you see this wrench that shows up. So to get that to show up, though, you have to do it in the tools area where you have to associate a piece of technology with that data. So I'm going to kind of jump there and just show you. I'm going to go to this database. Okay. Under the compliance area, it's a CUI asset. And if I go down here, click on this um, CUI icon, then I can scroll down. What did I say? So I'm going to check this box for export controlled specified. And now if I go back to that page, export controlled specified, now you see a wrench instead of the checkbox. And I'm just, you know, clearly stating that this database does have the export controlled CUI specified data in it. And so, I mean, you do have to identify the data type in your environment because you need to know how to process it, how to handle it, who to share it with, who you can't share it with. Also, you need to know how to appropriately mark that CUI data if you ever need to do that. So, but how you could also use this page here in FutureFeed is, again, if you're still trying to figure out your assessment scope environment, start with the contracts, identify the contracts that you have that are bringing in FCI and CUI. And then if you want to identify the specific assets, that's only going to help you meet. There's a requirement in the AC family under 313 is the requirement ID. And it talks about having to have a data flow diagram or at least have an understanding of where your data is flowing in your environment so you can really control and manage that data flow. And so here is another way to help you with tracking or identifying or at least doing that analysis of the data flow. Sensitive data, if you are interested, we had some users of FutureFeed. They wanted to be able to track other types of data other than FCI and CUI in this environment, like HIPAA, employee social security number, other sensitive or proprietary data that they wanted to track. And so that's what this area is for. It does still list out the CUI registries. And then if you go way down, you could create your own category on tax data. Well, tax data. Okay. So just your decision if you want to use this area. Okay, settings. So, a couple settings. One, you can integrate your future feed environment with your local ticketing system. You just put that ticket system email address in there. And now in my Poem actions and my Poem projects, I could send emails directly from FutureFeed to my ticketing system if this is enabled. So right now it's enabled, and where you see this capability is again in your system, in your FutureFeed Poem, right here, this little envelope icon. I could send out an email on this one poem item, which is for 321 if I wanted to my ticketing system by clicking on that, make some additional notes, maybe status updates, and hit send. Um, so if it's not enabled, you just can't click on that envelope. The only tip here I have is it can be any email in here. It doesn't have to be a ticketing system email. The system just needs an email. So you could, if you don't have a ticketing system, but you would like for certain management personnel to be updated on poem items or poem projects, you could put their email in here, put a shared email in here, whatever have you. All right, so in Future Feed, there are several triggers where a poem item will be created. And that poem item, once it gets created, it's going to be pre-populated with a default due date. You can control what that default due date is here. Now you can change the due date, and you don't always have to use due dates in quarters, but this is just related to that initial default due date that's in there, and you could change it afterward if you'd like. So if I created a poem today, the due date is going to be 4 quarters out. So organizational scale, what this is a place for you to define what impact, effort, and cost is for your organization. The easiest way I have to explain this is if you're a large company and you have a very large IT budget, cybersecurity budget, well, a low cost item for you may be a couple $1,000s. Okay. And maybe management, they don't care to know about low cost items. It's just up to you to go and do that work. Um, if you're a smaller company, a low cost item for you maybe $500. So you're standardizing the language. Multiple people may have access to your future feed environment. Multiple people may be responsible for managing system poem items, right? Managing non-compliance or vulnerabilities or system flaws and getting those all corrected. And so you'll want to define the impact, effort, and cost as what it means for your company. And so then in your system poem, you could see for all the poem items, you can define the impact, effort, and cost. Okay. And then this information is just coming into play when you're trying to prioritize work. You would factor in impact, effort, and cost. The framework, you have the ability to disable that FedRAMP warning if you're an admin. Um, some folks don't have a FedRAMP requirement, and so you can disable it if it gets annoying. Okay, now we're going to talk about people. This in the people area of FutureFeed, in the people subway stop. This is where you're creating accounts. You do have to be an administrator, a FutureFeed administrator to create accounts. Just simply add user is an employee, third-party assessor, first name, last name, level of account. Okay. Delete accounts, reset MFA, all that stuff. If you're not an admin, you can just see the listing of users because you'll be able to assign responsibility to them if you need to. So after you give everyone access who you want to have access to your future feed environment. Next, you're going to want to start creating or defining the security related roles and responsibilities. I guess not responsibilities, but the security related roles in your company. Responsibilities comes a little bit later. But we do have some default here, and you could choose to use them. If you don't want to use them, just hit not applicable. Um, but think about the 171 requirements. Think about all the people who end up being involved with getting the work done. Those are the people you're going to want to create accounts for in your future feed environment. And if you guys can give me 1 second, I got to grab my battery. 1 second, I'll be right back. Okay. So yeah, think about, everybody at your company or even external to your company. You could create a role for external service provider. So really anybody who you're going to be assigning responsibility to for getting the requirements implemented, but also the people who are going to be involved with ensuring that those things get implemented throughout the year and doing the work throughout the year. So just simply add new role and create it, and then find the role and get it assigned to someone. Default accountable. So um let me show you here. In any of the RACI matrix fields, right? Right here. This accountable, you can choose to set the default accountable. So every item you make, every inventory item like we did for this firewall, any inventory item we make, any poem I make, any document entry I make, then the default accountable role will be whoever you set here. And then manage teams. So you're going to want to create teams think about, again, everybody you have involved, HR for the training requirements, HR for the personnel security, system admins for the technical implementation. Maybe you have external service providers, you know, just create a team and then go to that team. Let's say you created the compliance team, add the people to the team, set a team leader if you want. And now when all throughout FutureFeed, when you assign responsibility, you can assign responsibility to a team or the role, or in some cases, you can assign responsibility to an individual user. We do recommend that you assign responsibility to either a role or a team, though. So that way, when you have personnel changes, someone leaves the company. For example, let's say that Maxine is the incident team lead. And Maxine has been working with the company for many years. They have a lot of responsibility. Uh, since they're the incident team lead under the IR family here, maybe she's the person responsible, Maxine. Let me get to that field here. As accountable. Look at she's the accountable person for the IR controls. And so instead of if Maxine leaves the company, I instead of having to go figure out everything that Maxine was working on, if you associated the requirement or the responsibility with this role title, then it stays with this role. So simply you got to go in here, change out Maxine's name, identify who picked up that role, Cynthia. Now when Cynthia logs in to FutureFeed, they're going to see everything Maxine was working on because you associated the responsibility with the role and not the individual. Um, Same thing with teams. Anybody who's a part of a team can see all of this responsibility that's assigned to the team. And so you would just go in here, clean up who's left and add who's part of the team. And now anybody who's part of that team can see the responsibilities assigned to that team. If you assign responsibilities to a user, then when they quit or leave or transfer or whatever, um, you have to go in and manually reassign all those things that were assigned to that user and assign them to somebody else. Whereas if you just associated the responsibility with the role or the team, it stays tied to the role in the team. This populate button here, what this is why I pulled up this document. Okay, so here I'm going to show you the assessment guide just for example purposes. Let me go to one here that's technical, 318. All right, so any C3PAO assessment team members, they're taught to follow the assessment guide for conducting their assessment. And so in here, there's some potential assessment methods and objects. So an assessor will read this and is saying potentially for this requirement, which is limit unsuccessful logon attempts, potentially you should be interviewing or speaking to someone with personnel, someone with information security responsibility, maybe a system developer or a system and network administrator, because these are typically the roles that implement something like this. For sure, this is a technical, usually system administrator network. So whenever we saw like roles or teams like this, system developer, system network administrator, what we did in FutureFeed is we created them. So here's the system developer role. Here's the system network administrator, and system and network administrator were mentioned under these 79 requirements here. There's the 318 logon attempts. And so if you're just getting started with NIST 171 and you have to kind of start allocating and getting people engaged and allocating the requirements out so that you can start reviewing them, well, you could use these pre-built teams here. I used them all. I guess we'll finance team. Click, create, then go find the finance team entry. Is this alphabetical? Yeah. So there it is, and then add the people to that team. And now these system and network administrators, these 4 people here are gonna be associated with those, what was it, 78, 79 requirements that called out the system and network administrator role. These people, this team actually, is associated or already tagged in the RACI model for those 79 requirements. That's what the populate button is and how we built them. All right, so now we're going to talk about tools and documents. And pretty much what I say now is applicable to both areas. Managing tools and documents is the same. Adding tools and documents is the same. The process that you would follow is going to be the same. Okay, you're going to add a tool and then go open up that inventory item and fill out that metadata. You're going to add a document, go open up that inventory item and fill out that metadata. Okay, so I'm going to talk about them both, and then I'll open up the floor for questions. So to add either a tool or a document, you're just clicking on this add new item icon. I do want to point out though, in both, we have an active category and a pending category. So up here, if I add something up here, that means this tool or service that I'm about to add or record in FutureFeed it's active. It's already in production. We're already utilizing it. It's already implemented and enforced, if I add something down here, then that is painting the picture that I'm going to be acquiring that tool in the future or acquiring that service in the future. And when you add things down here, they do get created and put on your system POAM, your FutureFeed POAM. Okay. So when you add things down here, it will be logged on your system POAM because you're going to track that item until you purchase it, configure it, deploy it, validate it, and then you can remove it off your system POAM. If you delete anything, they show up down here under archive. So let me open one up. If I want to delete something, it's this little archive icon. It's a folder here. Do I want to archive this item? Yes or no? If I do, then it's going to be found down below. If you accidentally create an item in the wrong place, like let's say I created something here in the active area, but it really should have been in the pending area and on my system POAM, then it just relates to this field up here. So right now this firewall, it's in production, it's active. If I wanted to put it on my POAM, just click pending, set a POAM due date. And now it will be on my system POAM. Okay, let me move it back. Click too fast. POAM's the due date. Do you want to do a quarter due date or change it back and you can set an actual date now? Okay. So the process in tools and documents. In tools, you're going to log your technology. Think of all the requirements and what type of technology is involved in your environment. So you're going to log all of the assets that store, process, or transmit CUI data or FCI data. But then you also will log all of the assets that are protecting that data, are logically connected to that data. Think of all those asset categories. So if I open one up under the compliance tab, you have asset categories. If you want to learn about the categories of assets, like a CUI asset stores, processes, and transmits CUI. Security protection asset is protecting that CUI. Okay. So any assets that fit these categories here, you'll log them into FutureFeed. It's up to you if you want to choose to log out of scope assets. I would recommend logging out of scope assets, and then maybe in the overview area, you describe why something is out of scope. You might need to remember that information when you meet with the assessment team. They're going to want to understand your assessment scope to include what's in scope of the requirements and what you have identified as out of scope. And they might want to then explore, okay, you said something's out of scope. Well, prove to me that that asset is logically and or physically disconnected from what is in scope. Okay, so you're going to have to do that analysis. It's all part of the scoping exercise where you have to identify what's in scope and what's out of scope. Definitely whatever's in scope, log into FutureFeed. It's your call if you want to put the out of scope stuff in there. I just would recommend that you do, because then you're documenting your analysis. And let's say I said this was out of scope. Well, here I'm going to say why I said it was out of scope. And then maybe in the evidence folder, I'll upload some evidence showing something being logically separated from what is in scope. Okay. But this for the tools. Just hit the add button and start logging your technology. First, you identified the mission. So, what is the purpose of the tool? Is it an endpoint? Is it MFA? Is it a firewall? And then I don't know how to spell Sequoia. So we'll just leave Mac OS. um, okay. Is it on-prem? Is it hosted in the cloud? Is it being provided and managed by a service provider? Okay. And log it. So after you log the asset, then go find it, open it up, the inventory item, and fill out all this metadata. So RACI responsibility, do try to have the R filled out and the A filled out. If this endpoint was being managed by external service provider, then I could identify the external service provider who's managing it in this CRM field. Is it provided by a vendor? Description, connect. So what we're doing here is you're associating this inventory item. So right now I'm in a tool, an endpoint. I'm associating it to the requirements is what I'm doing here. So it looks like I already filtered on CUI encryption. All right, my endpoints need to have CUI encryption on them because they have CUI stored. What else needs to be implemented on an endpoint? Access control. You have to have audit logging on your access points. Um, you know, if this was a MFA tool, I would link it to the MFA requirements. If this was a firewall, I would link it to the firewall requirements or the requirements that typically get implemented by a firewall. If it's a 3D printer, link it to the requirements that you want to. But that's what you're doing is when you make these connections, then if I go to the 31311 requirement now under my assess area, 31311, if I scroll down to where I find my evidence, so technology is going to come up in the test area, then I should see my Mac OS. Okay. So I'm think of it as like you're building out your body of evidence, or yeah, you're associating the requirements with artifacts, which is your evidence that you then have to give to the assessor. Okay, that's the connect area. So what you should do in the tools is log all the technology, then open up the inventory item and start filling out this metadata overview, connect it to the security control requirements. And don't worry about if you're not sure what to connect at this point in time, or maybe you're connecting too much at this point in time. That's fine, because then when you get to this assess area and you do an assessment, an internal assessment, you're going to clean up those connections. Okay. So let's say I was reviewing this 31311 control. I read the requirement. I really understand. I'm speaking with someone at my company and interviewing them and trying to figure out how this requirement is implemented. And let's say if I go down here and I have associated the wrong document, like clean desk policy. Okay, why is my clean desk policy or my email policy associated with my CUI encryption requirement? From an assessor's point of view, I'm an assessor, a lead CCA. If I'm looking at the CUI encryption requirement, please only give me evidence associated with CUI being encrypted. We don't need to see the authorized visitor list under this requirement. We're going to look at that under the requirement that talks about visitors in the PE family. Okay, so down here in your evidence area, you only want the evidence to show. So I would get rid of these things. And let's say shouldn't have connected my Mac OS here because it doesn't make sense. Then you just remove them now. And if I go back to that Mac OS tool, I'm not going to see the 1311 control there anymore. See, it's been removed. So at this time, when you're logging your tools and you're logging your security documents, go ahead and connect everything that you think makes sense, because then when you do your assessment, you're going to clean up those connections and you're going to have a little bit better understanding of how the requirements are implemented or how they need to get implemented, where they need to get implemented. And so um, you'll do all that cleanup exercise then. Right now, you're just trying to get the tools into FutureFeed, the documents into FutureFeed, and associate them with the requirements. And yeah. What else do I want to? So you can see the different categories. You got on-prem, online, service providers. You have an area if you want to track specific assets in your environment that you really want to focus on. It's up to you how you'd like to use that area. Any vendors, you would log them. Again, you're just logging them in the active or the pending area and filling out that metadata. We do have an area for you to upload your vulnerability scan results if you're interested, in which case it will create like a trends analysis for you throughout the time. And if you upload a vulnerability scan, all of the open vulnerabilities then will be put onto your system POAM. And then in the tools, the same layout. Just log the security documentation. Is it a policy, procedure, worksheet, plan? If I'm in the reference document here, then I can log diagrams, lists, CRMs, configuration items. Um, just log them, then open up the inventory item and fill out this metadata. The only thing I have left to show you then is this document. Like, if you're interested in using a template that FutureFeed provides, you can get to it by using this populate button. Click on that, find the template you want to provide. Let's say your company doesn't have a cybersecurity policy. You took a look at this one, it looks pretty good. You want to start with that. Then you just go over here, hit copy and create. Then find that document. If you got a lot, you might want to search for it. Cybersecurity. Okay. I didn't copy it apparently. Did I? I might be moving a little fast for it. But that's how you end up using a document. And if it was a cybersecurity policy, it was probably in the policy. There it is. It's in the policy category. And so now if I open it, there's that template that I viewed. You would open it up and get it, start filling it out. So in FutureFeed, you can, for documents, there's kind of several things. You can use our live document editor, in which case you would be editing and building out and updating, maintaining a document in FutureFeed here. You could attach or upload, right now we're in this cybersecurity policy, so I would upload a approved version of my cybersecurity policy. Or if you go over here, you can actually put a link to it. So if you happen, if you want it housed on SharePoint, you could put your SharePoint link here if you want to. This live document editor, though, in here you can revise, edit. If I make a change, if I make a major change and I want to publish that change, I hit publish. It's creating for me then a version history. So now I'm on version 2. Every time I hit publish, I'm versioning my document. So you have some versioning that you can do there. Now, let's say I want this cybersecurity policy to be approved. Then this task area is where you create tasks associated the activity you want done. So let's say I want my CISO to review and approve this policy. It doesn't need to repeat. I'm going to assign it to my CISO, due date, hit save. Now, Robert will get a notification that he has a new task and he will open it up. He'll be presented with that live document. It's still a working version. Click on it. Right now, he could still edit it if he wants to, but let's say it looks good. Everything's good to go. Save and complete. Sign the document. CISO. Oops. CISO approved. Looks good to go. Hit clear. Mark complete. And now it's kicking me out of this task assignment and it's moving me into the evidence. And there's my CISO approved cybersecurity policy. I can't edit this now. It's like a PDF version, date and timestamp over here. So the task area is where you're creating tasks to get things done, but also eventually then you'll want to create some tasks that happen that reoccur, right? So let me clear out of here and go to my procedures. Under my risk assessment procedure is maybe where I want to create a task um, for an annual risk assessment and then assign it to my risk assessment team or whoever and make it repeat annually and hit submit. So in the task area is where you are creating tasks for initial implementation and getting things to a compliant state. But then you're also going to create tasks for things that need to happen throughout the year per your policies. Okay. And I did run out of time. So let me see. I think I got a chat. Okay. Yeah, that's a good suggestion, Vanessa. Thank you. You could submit stuff like that to support@futurefeed.co so then it gets to the correct people. Um, any other questions before I go ahead and drop? Thank you for your time. Like I said at the beginning of the session, this was recorded, so you will get a link to the recording, and feel free to sign back up for this session if you need to, especially after you get to start doing the work. Maybe you have a few questions. You could sit through this again, and then you could ask those questions during this session, or you could join the Thursday session and ask them there. But if there are no questions, then I will end today's training session. Anything?
Thank you. This was awesome. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
you're welcome. All right. Bye, all. Have a good afternoon. Oh, wait. So, yes, you're welcome, Emily. Thank you.